Greetings! In today's video, I'll be taking a look at a set of Chinese watercolor paints by Yasutomo. This is a set of 12 colors in tubes of 12 milliliters. They are labeled as being authentic Chinese watercolors intended for traditional Chinese painting. The paints are made in China and distributed by Yasutomo. I'll be testing them with black ink, also distributed by Yasutomo, but made in Taiwan. As I poured the first color in the palette, I noticed that it had separated quite a bit. For all subsequent colors, I shook and mixed the tubes as best I can, and the paints came out in a better state. I use toothpicks to level the paint blobs. I poured 11 of the 12 colors in the palette. I prefer to use white paint straight from the tube if I can, so I'll add it in the palette when I want to use it, and use the paint when it's fresh. According to the information on the packagings, the watercolor can be mixed with Chinese or Sumi ink to get dulled colors. Both ink and watercolors are said to be light-fast. Another characteristic they have in common is directly related to the traditional way these are used. The standard surfaces for these mediums are much thinner than Western watercolor paper, so in some cases, the paper has to be mounted on another surface after the painting is done. This means wetting the back of the painted paper. It also means that the paints and inks used need to have a stronger binder so that they don't run down the painting in the process of mounting it. I proceeded to do the swatches of both the watercolors and the ink. As you can see, the paints dried rather well in my palette. Some have small cracks, but they still hold on to the palette and they look smooth. The colors in the watercolor sets are Chinese white, gamboge yellow, burnt sienna, rouge, carmine red, cinnabar, scarlet, vermilion, light green, light blue, indigo, and phthalo blue. This set doesn't have any pigment information on the packaging. I swatched the colors on 140-pound cellulose watercolor paper and also on rice paper. I swatched the paints on both sides of the rice paper. I'll explain why in a moment. The watercolors are said to be water resistant, yet fully water soluble. This is in relation to using the paints on Chinese papers with the intent of mounting them the traditional way as well. In the idea of using these paints with more of a Western approach, they dried well in the palette and I had no problem reactivating them. the dried ink also reactivated without any issue. On our regular watercolor paper, I was able to scrub the ink off by working at it. If I just layer color on top of the line, the ink doesn't move. On rice paper, scrubbing at the colors causes the paper to peel. Overlaying colors on other dried colors doesn't seem to reactivate them either. For testing these paints out, I went my usual way. I found a reference picture on Pinterest and made a quick painting. I like to research things before I try to use them, that way I can more easily adjust my approach and make the best of the medium's strength. Chinese watercolors are not the same as our Western watercolors. They were not crafted for the exact same purpose. Some colors are very opaque, some are very transparent. Some opaque colors are often used in conjunction with the semi-transparent paper, as they are painted on the back of the painting to heighten a contrast or enrich a color. It is usually not suggested to use these paints on Western watercolor paper, as the colors will not absorb the same way into the paper. The Chinese paints don't use the same pigments or binder as the Western paints. Often, Chinese paints will use minerals or dyes that come from nature. Some Western paints will do that as well, but the paint-making methods are different. The Chinese binder is made for a very different type of paper and handling as well. If one has to wet the backside of a thin paper to mount it on a stiffer paper, the paints have got to be bound strongly enough to withstand that. Still, I wanted to try it out for myself. I'm using a multimedia sketchbook anyway, so that might help the paints work more smoothly. I also tried to work with the most transparent paints, such as the yellow, carmine red, and phthalo blue. This set has a typical color layout for Chinese painting, but I find it complete from a general point of view as well. It might have only one yellow, but it has many reds and blues, and a burnt sienna. It is possible to mix a wide array of colors from those. Also, many sets come with only one yellow. It's not a good or a bad thing, it's just a thing. There are a few last things I want to mention about these paints. First, this whole set was very affordable. It costs less than $8 for the 12 tubes of paint. As far as quality for price, this is one of the best deals I've seen. Second thing I want to mention is that the paints and the ink have quite a strong smell to them. The ink smells like rotten earth a bit. It has that kind of woodland ground in the fall thing going on. This is not unique to this ink. All bottles of Chinese ink I've used in the past smelled very similarly. The watercolors have an odd smell to them that I've found in both cheap and professional paints in the past. I remember the Pentalic watercolors smelling worse than these Chinese paints. The Rembrandt paints I have from tubes also smell terrible. The Chinese paints have a similar smell, but not quite as strong. It doesn't smell as soon as I open the palette. I have to get my nose closer to them to notice it. So, what's my final take on these? I really like them. I wish I could have gotten those as an option when I first started painting. For the price, they would have made me very happy. Of course, I have to keep in mind their specific constraint when I paint with them, but that's okay. They worked really well in my multimedia book, and I'm looking forward to testing them on more surfaces. I love the color selection and the fact that these paints come in tubes rather than dry pans. They are compatible with the ink, which is also very affordable, so that's all really nice for the artists on a budget. Have you tried Chinese paints? Did you like painting with them? Let me know in the comments below. Take care, bye bye.